somewhere.
Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting shortly. All right. Thank you all for coming in for the AWS Sydney User Group August edition. So we've got some pretty fantastic presentations for you, which involves AI and automation. All right, so let's look at the agenda items for today. So we'll be kicking off with Shan, who will be presenting from Nullify. He's the CEO and co-founder, and then followed up by Lorenzo. Lorenzo is the CEO of 6pillars.ai. Then we'll be followed up with some food and drinks. Now, I am incredibly proud to say that Nullify and 6pillars.ai are sponsors, and we really appreciate your support. So thanks to the Nullify team and 6pillars.ai. So yes, just wanted to give you a quick and short summary of what these techs are. So Nullify, the virtual security engineer for your Codebase. Now, Nullify is a security tool that helps developers find and fix security issues in their code. Now, it uses a combination of open source tools, vulnerability databases, and large language models, that's LLMs, to scan code for potential vulnerabilities and automatically fix them. It is available as a GitHub app and integrates with other popular development tools as well. So, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Nullify because they recently became the AWS partners. So incredibly proud of you guys. So well done. Good stuff. Now, 6pillars.ai. Now 6 Pillars delivers cloud security automation in AWS you can finally trust. So 6 Pillars is a level 1 certified MSSP. Now, MSSP, for those of you, just as a refresher, is Managed Security Service Provider, and it's also a well-architected tech partner. So they've developed an auto-remediation platform that uses AWS native tools and AI to deliver continuous compliance with best practices, which works across multiple frameworks all the way to production pipelines. The platform also ensures that the availability of your workloads is maintained. So, guys, here's the thing. So even though this is a summary, but trust me on this one, you really want to know what's going on in the backbone, and that's pretty fascinating what these guys have come up with. So it's a pretty interesting tech. And last but not least, for those of you who haven't entered, you've got a chance to win a Chromebook. Now that's worth $650, and it's a pretty useful sort of a tech piece that you're gonna get for free anyway if you are lucky. But either way, without further ado, I will pass it on to Shan, CEO of Nullify. Cheers, guys.
If you can't catch the QR code, we do have some sheets out there, so we'll run it until 7:30.
Yeah.
You have to be here to win.
You do. Otherwise, I'm the next winner. So please don't on the table in the kitchen. On the table there. So the win, whether you win is enough. Statistically, it was pretty good.
It's on? It's on. Hey everyone, I'm Shan. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Nullify. I just want to thank everyone for coming and listening to a little bit about what we're building and a bit about our journey. And obviously thanks to both AWS and Polar 7 for having us here. As Anna had said, our journey is very much rooted in AWS. We started building things on the cloud in AWS probably 4 years ago. It was a program we would run alongside them with University of New South Wales, teaching kids about cloud security. Went on to start building things in enterprise, particularly on Kubernetes and serverless. So if you guys saw us at the serverless MeetUp last month, this talk might sound a bit familiar. And obviously recently we became an AWS partner and are listing on the marketplace. But before all of that, we were a group of software engineers and playing around with some security engineering areas, mainly around vulnerability exploitation. And as we started to go out into industry and kind of see how software teams operated at scale, what we found was that most organizations, whether they were enterprises or startups, often had sometimes 1,000 developers for every one security engineer. So I want a quick show of hands. Who here builds software of some kind, maybe back end, front end? Cloud engineers, you count as well. Okay, so the whole room basically. So really what we found was that today, much more than applications are code. Infrastructure is code. Writing Terraform, CloudFormation. Your containers are defined in Docker files, that's code as well. Even your pipelines are defined in code. And so developers, they're pushing code almost twice as fast, and they suddenly have to become responsible for much more than just the code that they're writing that's being pushed to production. And security teams, which as I mentioned are outnumbered 1,000 to 1, are really struggling to keep up with this pace of delivery. They're stuck in these old security testing cycles of 2 to 6 weeks, blocking production, and overall delivering poor outcomes for both their engineering and security organizations. And it's then no surprise that when we talk to developers, they all said that security slows them down, and even their security leaders say that it's a blocker to their time to market. And this centralized testing model that we observed had a lot of persistent problems, even with the current state of security products. You have these central security teams who are outnumbered, who don't have context into how the applications are being built or maintained. So they don't understand which things are actually vulnerabilities, which things need fixing. They often have to integrate multiple security tools and vendors, so maybe one to scan their code, one to scan their packages, etc. And these blocked releases get rushed in the end anyways, and that's when you get developer and engineering teams saying that they're behind their release schedule and getting angry emails from security and vice versa. So why is it still so hard, even today, to shift security testing left and earlier in the SDLC? As I mentioned, it's very, very difficult to implement security tooling if you have large developer environments. So let's say you have 1,000 repositories, you're building everything from Terraform to JavaScript workloads. Who implements security testing across all these repositories? And who's going to maintain all that security tooling over time? Maybe I have 3 or 4 different vendors, one for each different type of security testing. Who's responsible when these tests fail and block pipelines before releasing to production? And once I've identified that, there's like a people aspect to it. So all this added security work isn't really fitting into developers' day-to-day workflows, right? They get tickets out of Jira, and their job is to push features to production and deliver value through software, if you're a software company, right? Nowhere in their job description is fixing vulnerabilities or figuring out which ones to fix first. So the added security work and the missing context means that shifting security left still has a really, really high upfront time and money investment for most companies, even if you're a mature cloud-native engineering organization. So when we sat around late last year thinking about how we could solve this problem, we were using a lot of open source security testing tools to do a lot of the scanning in our pipelines. Maybe we were scanning our Terraform with TFSec, or scanning our Python with Bandit, making sure our container images were secure with tools like Trivi. And we realized there was a really, really mature ecosystem of enterprise maintained open source tools out there that just about every type of security testing you'd like to do So whether that's static code analysis or API fuzzing and everything in between. So Nullify orchestrates all of these best-in-class scanners and reduces all these vendors, or the need for you to go to market for all these vendors, into one unified solution. And then it reduces the time and complexity in maintaining all this tooling across all your environments. So as I mentioned, it's not too bad having one product for all your different security testing needs, but still becomes a challenge in implementing this at scale. So I want to show of hands, who here is on GitHub or their company is using GitHub? All right, keep your hand raised if you have more than 200 repositories in your GitHub. All right, 500. 1,000. I know Chris is at Travelport, they probably got like 10,000. So adding plugins into your pipelines across 10,000 repositories is like an 18-month project for an enterprise. Even if you have 100 repos, it's not a quick process. So to solve this problem, we package Nullify up as a GitHub app, which means that every single time a developer commits, opens a pull request, or merges to main, the Nullify virtual security engineer is receiving webhooks for each of these events, continuously detecting, fixing, and suggesting remediations for every single thing that it finds across your entire GitHub organization. And by removing this high barrier of adoption, we can give complete coverage across all your repos and give a completely instant time to value across all your different security testing needs. So authorizing through the GitHub API means that we receive webhooks through all those events that I described, and it means check runs get triggered on every commit, pull request, or merge to main without you having to configure pipelines manually. So in this example here, open up a PR, change some Python in it and some Node.js package files, and you can see Nullify detected both and ran the appropriate scan. So really starting to solve these kind of implementation problems of DevSecOps around multiple tools and high implementation cost. But we still have this problem of getting developers to care about security. A lot of them are already really busy, and they don't have a lot of time outside of their day-to-day workflows to spend on security testing. And the last thing they need is another dashboard or somewhere external to go to that they then probably have to call security about anyways to figure out how it works. So to solve this, we embedded Nullify into every single developer team and gave every single developer, cloud, platform engineer, anyone building in GitHub, this continuous security testing feedback on every workflow that I mentioned before. So whether you're committing, whether it's to a new branch or domain, Nullify is making sure you're not accidentally pushing up hard-coded secrets like AWS access keys or private keys, or even PII hard-coded into your test data. We're also making sure that on every PR, you're not checking in code or packages that have vulnerabilities in them or potential vulnerabilities. And then we're also giving coverage to developers across everything that's already in their GitHub repositories by maintaining issues on every merge to main and maintaining this vulnerability state of everything that's already in your entire repository. And again, this is all with just one click from a GitHub app. And so now we have all this complete coverage and continuous workflow feedback on every developer workflow. We can go a step further and really start to achieve our full vision for DevSecOps, which is how do we not just reduce the number of vulnerabilities in production, but how do we reduce the total number of security work items generated altogether? So for anyone here who's operated any type of security product, they'll know that the first thing that happens when you turn it on is that you get a million different findings and alerts. Anyone here experience alert fatigue from any? Okay, quite a few. So giving this to developers is a surefire way of making them just not use this product or tool at all. So how do we go a step further and not just enable them to own security, but do so in a way that doesn't add work for them? And so by doing this, the way that we do this is we prioritize and correlate every single thing that we find in their environment. If we find a vulnerability in a package, it's not really that useful to know that it's a higher critical vulnerability because there might be 4 or 5. Which one do I fix first? maybe I'm not even using the component in that NPM library that is vulnerable. So Nullify detects the exploitability of a package, whether or not the vulnerability has been exploited in the wild, and whether or not it's reachable in your code, and whether or not you actually need to fix it. And if it is, it tells you the version you need to update to. It also uses Amazon Bedrock to actually suggest which vulnerabilities can be fixed within code, and suggests right then and there. Over time, we've tuned these prompts and models, first with GPT-4 and now with Claude 2 on Amazon Bedrock, to give developers actionable auto fixes that actually fix the vulnerability. And so in this example, it's just an SQL injection and some Python Django code. But really reducing that mean time to fix, and again, retaining developer productivity while still giving them the tools they need to stay secure. And so moving away from that centralized model that I showed earlier, now, and this is kind of how Amazon solved this problem with their security guardians program, is they embed a security engineer into every single developer team. Now, unless you're Amazon, that's pretty hard to do. So Nullify becomes that virtual security engineer embedded into every team, that each team can then use to self-serve the testing and fixing, and then the outnumbered security team can spend more of their time governing, reporting, and measuring secure SDLC success across their entire organization. This means that Nullify is the first developer-first, all-in-one security platform, covering a range of security testing types, while still giving the power to developers to own these testing activities. This is a boring product roadmap you can ask me about later. Nullify doesn't persist any state server-side. So if you were at our talk at Sydney Serverless, you'd know that we're fully built on serverless, which means outside of the Lambda execution runtime, we're not persisting any of your state, whether it's code or vulnerabilities. We also don't store any of that data beyond metadata server-side. And because we integrate through GitHub, you don't have to trust us, you just have to trust GitHub SSO. And yes, we run Nullify on Nullify, like while we're building it. Nullify we raised 1.1 million in venture capital from OIF Ventures and a few other VCs at the start of the year. And that's actually an old number. We have over 1,000 developers at companies with five devs like Engine Room, 20 devs like Mast, all the way up to large regulated enterprises with thousands of repos and hundreds of developers like NIB Health Funds. So thanks so much for listening a bit about what we're building. Apologies, we had our launch event 2 weeks back in Sydney, but if you're going to be in Melbourne tomorrow, we're having a Melbourne launch event. But we're also listing on the AWS marketplace in the next week or two. And we're also proud participants in the AWS Generative AI Accelerator, through which we're getting our Amazon Early Access to Bedrock. So if you're in town on the 31st of August, please come to our demo day and say hello. We're also hosting the Sydney Cloud Native Security Meetup at the end of the month. And we're also going to be presenting at the Sydney SHASR on AWS Meetup, also here, 21st of August. So thanks so much for listening, and yeah.
Hi, that was a very captivating presentation. Thanks. My question is, many organizations, including ours, we have CI/CD platforms such as Jenkins or Bamboo. So how does your tool fit into such an environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the main things we identified when we were adding security testing was exactly that problem, right? Someone's using Jenkins, someone using Bamboo, someone using Azure DevOps. So if you're adding security testing in your pipelines through plugins, then you have to build a plugin for each of those different pipeline types. But because Nullify is a GitHub app, it creates these check runs parallel to your pipelines. So it's actually pipelineless, completely pipelineless, completely actionless. You don't have to manage any plugins. All you do is you authorize the app, subscribes to all the webhook events, and then that's it. So if your Jenkins pipeline executes on every pull request or Bamboo pipeline, Nullify comes up as a separate check run on your PR. And if you're using GitHub Actions, this means it doesn't hit into your build minutes or anything like that. So it's actually parallel to your pipelines, but it still runs on your PRs, which means you don't have to add anything or change your pipeline configurations.
Well, does it happen after coming after the commit phase of the?
On pull requests.
You've got a from Bitbucket or somewhere else. Wait from Bitbucket.
Yeah, Bitbucket.
Bitbucket support is coming first week of September. So at the moment, just GitHub, but Bitbucket's new for sure. Join early access for Bitbucket.
The code pipeline?
Ooh.
It's a good code commit. Maybe we should.
You might have to. Might have to.
We're too tied up with AWS. We have to.
Would you get flooded by error messages? For example, people say security problem X, Y, Z.
The question is, will Nullify actually create so many error messages that most developers just couldn't be bothered looking through the whole list? Does it attempt to summarize the actual errors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on pull requests, Nullify only scans, if you see in that example there, the file's changed. So it can only look at what's new in the code change. It won't just scan the whole thing. And it also only comments above a certain severity by default. If you, for some reason, want to see like low severity findings and just annoy your developers, you can. You can specify in like a config file, like the minimum severity you want. And you can also ignore certain ones that you know aren't known vulnerabilities or hard-coded secrets. Those are some of the ways you can manage exceptions, but out of the box, Nullify is built to reduce the noise for developers, so you don't annoy them. Yeah.
The mic here, please.
Way off the back.
It's alright, I can use the extra energy.
Hi.
Extra steps, yeah.
Great presentation anyway. Thanks for that. Which tool you use for the vulnerability scanner if it is not a secret?
No.
It's not, and that's the beauty of this. We love open source. We contribute back to a lot of these projects. Depends what we're scanning. If we find Python, we'll use Bandit, which is like the probably best maintained Python scanner out there. If we're scanning for secrets, we're probably using Git leaks or Trufflehog. If we're scanning for vulnerabilities in packages, we're using Google's OSV scanner, which is really just a wrapper for the National Vulnerability Database.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
There's-
Have you guys tried OpenVAS?
What's that, sorry?
OpenVAS? OpenVAS.
Yeah, we use that for DAST as well.
Alright, I got it. Thank you.
Find a full list in our docs if you're curious, yeah.
I got it.
It's alright, I'm getting my steps.
Do you support both cloud and on-premises?
Yeah, absolutely. This is in your code base, so you can be on-prem, you could be anywhere, right? Do you mean like your GitHub on-prem, or do you mean like your cloud is?
We have two environments, one cloud and one on-premises. So
Like your code base is hosted on premises. Yeah, that's fine
correct.
as well.
So we can install it on premises.
Correct, yeah. So if you have GitHub Enterprise or for Bitbucket, we'll probably start with Bitbucket Cloud, but plan to do Bitbucket Server eventually. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question. Oh, yeah,
my question is not follow-up. Thank you for the presentation. My question is like, does that security scan also cover the PII data compliance checking, that kind of security? It's not related to the code, but
Yeah, you'll be surprised. We are working with health techs and people, any companies handling PII. You'll be surprised how much it can make it into code. So, for example, maybe you're a property tech, like real estate tech website, and people upload their sensitive like lease agreements, and your developers have some of that in GitHub as test data. So the next piece for our secret scanning is exactly that. So detecting PII in documents or images. So for that we're using OCR. So maybe like a dummy passport or a dummy Medicare card. That can definitely be in code, like in your GitHub. So that's how we're thinking about PII scanning for sure.
So it's already supported.
Yeah, or
Soon to be supported, very soon to be supported. Yeah. So to start with, it'll just be stuff like passport numbers, addresses, email addresses, things like that.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Come and speak to me after.
Had a follow-up question from the question there. To avoid noise, who determines the severity of like each one of those warnings? Like, is it you, the user, those open source platforms?
Yeah. So really important point to raise, right? Like, I have to walk a line between secure guardrails and also customizability. If you make it too noisy, it's not going to get picked up. But if you make it, I suppose, not noisy enough, like you give the option to just turn everything off, then it's not going to have a good effect either. So the default severity is medium on pull requests. On a repo specific level, like let's say you're the code owner and you're like, oh, this repo is just like an internal service, it's not exposed to the internet. Maybe I only care about critical vulnerabilities because those are the ones that maybe I have to worry about. You can put in your Nullify config file for that repository, default severity critical, and then it won't comment on anything below critical. So that we have sensible defaults, but then we give enough customizability for the user. And then the security team, maybe they want to change that org-wide. So org-wide, I mean, maybe I'm a really security conscious organization, I want the minimum comment severity to be low. I can do that with the GitHub Nullify config file. And then there's other workflows around accepting risks with secrets. So maybe there's a certain, maybe like an auth-z API key you just know is not an issue for you guys. It's not sensitive. You can like allow this to that, org-wide again, or on a repo by repo level. But we try to make it as easy as possible that we, out of the box, aren't noisy, but still alert on as much things that are actually issues. And then if you still want to silence them, we give you enough customizability to do that.
Probably last question, and any others we can do afterwards.
To ask the question, who fixes the severity and who fixes the severity?
Yeah.
Who fixes the severity of?
Who fixes the vulnerabilities, you mean?
Yeah, no, the severity of, while scanning, and how much noise you want, how much you don't want. And
I see. Yeah.
Question, and in my opinion, from security perspective, it should be decided by security people based on risk assessment. Every application differs vulnerability, different things. Based on the risk assessment, you can fix those things. This is what my thinking. I'm not sure whether I'm correct or not.
Yeah.
So two things. The first one is, if it wasn't clear, like the security team can set a default for the whole organization, and then that can be overridden on like a workload by workload, repo specific. Because to your point, some repos or some code isn't as sensitive as others. So for those ones, maybe you can change it, right? So that's left up to the code owner, so whoever has access, branch protection access for that repository. So that's like a built-in audit log. And anyone can't just change it. Like an intern can't just say ignore everything. So whoever has merge privileges to a repository, usually those are engineering managers. They can change it on the repo specific level. But the security team has it org-wide. And the second thing is who's fixing, Nullify is fixing it for you. It's suggesting how to fix it, and then right away you accept or deny the fix. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Does
a lot.
that become its own commit?
It comes up when you click the commit suggestion. The commit author is the one who pressed the commit suggestion.
It's its own commit.
It's its own commit to the PR, correct. Thanks. Thank you.
always make a joke that Shan gives really good presentations, but he never practices. So yeah. I think he's also just spent like 40 hours on a flight, so good work, mate. Well done. I'll just test it. Yep, sweet. Hi, I'm Lorenzo from 6pillars.ai, and we're going to cover off some AWS native tools. We're going to cover off how we use AI. We're going to cover off the scary auto-remediation in AWS, but also how to ensure availability. Security automation isn't being adopted because it's scary, because it might break shit. And it can, absolutely. But what we essentially are after, best practice, is not just best practice. It's not just, well, how many in the room have gone through a compliance project, have been tainted or touched by a compliance project? Is that all? Okay. How many in the room are developers and or related to developers? Yep. And how many are related, sort of on the other side, maybe the DevOps or the operation, the cloud side? Okay, beautiful. So, continuous compliance is achieving best practice on a continuous basis. It is gold standard. It is the best practice of best practice. You can achieve it one of three ways. You can eliminate change, which is a little churlish. You can hire a dedicated team. This is Afterpay. Afterpay have a dedicated team. I'm not sure if they're 24/7, but they have a dedicated team and they are enforcing and ensuring compliance on an ongoing basis. Or, God forbid, you can automate stuff. Now, the benefits of auto-remediation specifically, and when I talk auto-remediation, it's not just using automation to remediate on a one-off basis, but you can do that, absolutely fine. What it is having autonomous self-healing and autonomous remediation that ensures that best practice configuration in your environment is maintained. But essentially the benefits are you can do more with less, there's less noise, we've spoken a lot about noise, we eliminate load fatigue, you can remediate once if you want, you can use the automation to just remediate once. It does lead to happier teams, it leads to more valuable junior staff, so staff coming up to speed faster, and they're expensive, and there aren't very many of them. And it even mitigates handover risks. So we've actually seen customers that we've helped achieve continuous compliance, and then the key person leaves, and the management and or the executives say, what kind of skills do we need to fill this? And what we've said is, look, just plug us into your other teams, maybe even into your developers, and we'll work with them and just leverage the automation. And ultimately, it does lead to continuous compliance. But there's a process, but we'll walk you through that. Surely there are tools, surely there are... you can blame, where is he, Paul, for that image. Okay, there are tools. I hope no one is enamored of these tools. Please don't take offense. But in our experience, you plug them in, and to Shan's point, plug them in and they create noise. If, God forbid, that tool is actually plugged into workflow automation, that noise will generate tickets. It will generate work. This is automation that generates work. Don't do that, please. And the work creates pain for cloud teams. Ultimately, remediation, it creates tickets, pain for cloud teams, and remediation is, in the vast majority of cases, it's manual. And that's okay. But if you do it once and you don't have a backstop, you may well do it again in the future. So what we really want to talk about is how does AWS themselves fix this problem, and how do they enable some of their largest enterprises to fix this problem? Meet SHASR. And it really is SHASR from SHASR, so I was overjoyed to find an image there. I just put in, like, female email bogan. Anyway, meet SHASR. SHASR is how AWS fixes this problem at scale. What she actually is AWS Security Hub Automated Security Response. Yes, they use SHASR. If you look for AWS ASR, and this is proof that this project, it's an open source project, it's proof that it is genuine and it's genuinely open source and it's run by geeks. Because if you type in AWS ASR, you're going to get automated speech recognition. If you type in AWS ASR GitHub, you'll find this open source repo. So AWS Security Hub integration, that's what it is. Integrates with AWS Security Hub. It is an out-of-the-box automation framework with runbooks. The runbooks are what do the work. And it's open source. It's based on AWS native tools, ready to run, and I basically covered this off in the last slide, but that's fine. The automated runbooks resolve the common misconfigurations. Now, when you say common misconfigurations, right now in Security Hub, there are around about 250 controls. These are best practice controls across around about 50 AWS services, and that number is growing. It's growing at around about 10 controls per month. But the remediation runbooks, they simply perform the best practice remediation steps. So if you have a look at how do I remediate this particular misconfiguration, you look at those steps. If there is a runbook that exists for that, then it will simply be performing those steps. How SHASR works, the inner workings of SHASR. So we've already talked about Security Hub. Security Hub obviously it combines with config. Config checks the changes. But then also it leverages step functions. You'll see IAM roles, event bridge rules, systems manager. I won't read everything that's up there. Lambda functions is important, and the fact that all of the remediations also have KMS keys and CloudWatch alarms and logs. This is how SHASR works. Now, Stephen, I'm not going to throw to you. I'm going to embarrass you in front of all these people because Stephen was supposed to speak to this, and he's technical and I'm not. But basically, you've got a finding that is created over here by config and Security Hub, generates the finding. This then goes through, and the rules, this is either manual remediation, so this is one-off remediation, or the event bridge or the actual custom actions will be configured to automatically remediate. So this is the change is detected by config, and then it is remediated automatically, and that is auto remediation here. So this is still using automation, but this is auto remediation where it is autonomous. So this then goes through. The orchestrator is really the brains of it. There is some role. What's the word I'm looking for, Stephen? Assumption. So there's some role assuming that goes on over here. And then here you've got the runbooks themselves. And then you've got the key which is required to actually perform that. So this is essentially the brains, and this is the grunt over here. And then finally you can select where you want sort of the alert and the acknowledgement to go, and go from there. Survive that. So how to install SHASR. This is what you got to do. And all of this is in that GitHub repo. It is fun for those who like a challenge. It's non-trivial. Yeah, look, there's a deployment guide if you want to just snap any of the QR codes that you want, absolutely. But essentially, you start off by enabling Security Hub and config, consolidated findings, that's a Security Hub thing. Then it's a subscription to Amazon SNS topics. Then we deploy the SHASR admin account stack, and that installs all of this stuff. Then we've got the member stacks, and I'll show you all of these in one of our installs as well. And then we've got the ASR, member roles, etc., etc. Look, how all this works together, this is where I start to run underground. Now, how has 6 Pillars used AWS ASR? So our focus has been on, one, availability. We want to ensure that any auto remediation will not break anything, will not impact availability. To give you some background, I've come from Bulletproof. Bulletproof was a managed service provider way back when. It's now part of AC3. Bulletproof specialised in 100% availability. That's what we want to bring to automation and auto-remediation as well. And for those who are actually best practice and you're using whatever infrastructure as code or you're managing stuff in the pipeline, best practice, pointing at you do, then we are actually also expanding into that to have matching controls all the way through from pipeline all the way through to your other environments, which is essential. And it's amazing because it actually is the path to unlocking availability. Because if you're good in the pipeline, you won't break shit in the rest of your environment. So how we've used it. We've brought availability, which we just banged on about. Speed, so we've automated the entire deployment process, and it is literally less than 1 minute of your time to deploy to first account. The first account is free forever. And it's fully automated. So it then goes off and through a combination of CloudFormation stacks, hardened cross-account roles, which are further hardened at the end of the process, and then step functions, etc., it's a fully automated and secure deployment. Choice, we have more automation. We're actually the largest, 6pillars is the largest contributor of automation to SHASR. We love SHASR. Frameworks, we also have ISO 27001, SOC 2, NIST CSF, etc., and we'll also be growing those. And also, if you do have, because we've got some customers with their own custom framework, then you can develop your own custom framework as well. You'll find that all of the categories within each framework, whether it be ISO, whether it be SOC, whether it be anything at all, those categories are consistent all the way through. They're IAM, they're logging, they're alerting, they're network, they're protecting data at rest, they're protecting data in transit, they're vulnerabilities, etc. Shifting left, we already have the first version of template scanning, but we will have, looking at you, Stephen, by September we will have fully matching controls all the way through. So matching and specifically controls that could break stuff, because we're going to touch on, you've got disruptive and non-disruptive automation. Non-disruptive automation you can turn on with impunity because it's not going to break anything. It's about logging, it's about alerting based on that logging, like use of the root account or unauthorized API calls or whatever else, or log file validation or encryption, but only of snapshots, but it will not break your workloads. Best practice, we also integrate with the Will Architecture tool, and FTR, for those who don't know, is an AWS acronym. It's Foundational Technical Review. If you're an ISV, at some point you may well want to do an FTR, and we can absolutely help you to sail through that. Less noise, we've got pre-tuned notifications and integrations with Teams and Slack. So if there is a change in compliance, then we will only alert on that change in compliance. We will not spam you twice a day with 500 controls. And AI, our special sauce, which leads to contribution, which we would love you to contribute. So customers' automation journey, it starts with the deploy. We review the configurations, we review the misconfigured controls. Great. At this point, our customers can deploy non-disruptive automation, and they can, as I said, do that with impunity. Then they can tune, and what we recommend is you start with potentially more disruptive automation. So let's say, don't open port 22 to the world. Great, you're actually compliant with that. So why don't you stay compliant with that? And you can, using the automation. So you backfill, you basically start with the non-disruptive controls and also the non-disruptive auto-remediation. You then move on to tuning the auto-remediation on the potentially more disruptive controls, but the ones that are already compliant. So again, you're not going to break anything. And finally, you then start to nibble away at the potentially more disruptive and non-compliant controls, and what you do is you backfill with auto-remediation. So that's using the automation as like a ratchet. You'll simply get more and more and more closer to best practice and continuous best practice. Finally, you can contribute and you can request new automations using natural language. So you can literally say, either I want to remediate this particular control in a different manner, which some customers have asked for, or you can request a new piece of automation on a control that doesn't already have some. So here is a quick live demo. I will move this, show you this. Okay, so this is the dashboard. This is where customers land. You'll see there are a few use cases across the top. And essentially, the deployment process is you deploy a new account like this. It's literally select the product. We do have a read-only version. You select the product, and then you can put in here the name, deployment, account ID, and go from there. This then creates these stacks. So this is what I did want to show you if you want to get nerdy and have a look at the stacks. Take screenshots, take photos if you want, no problem. But these are the stacks, and these are all based on SHASR. And you'll see that they start with, these are the member roles, etc. And they start with little cross-account role. The final step in this process is actually the hardening of that cross-account role. So that cross-account role will only be left with AWS Security Hub permissions, with AWS well-architected permissions, with events, and we have an integration with AWS DRS, which is Elastic Disaster Recovery Service. That's it. So we revert that cross-account role within the 20 minutes to least privilege. So if we want to have a quick look, here's EC2. This is, I'm non-compliant here. I've got port 22 open to the world. So I can now simply have a look. I know that it will be 4.1, and we can see that we're non-compliant on that. We then expand this, and you'll see every single security group that is in this account. And you can obviously deploy to multiple accounts and organizations. And you'll see down the bottom there's a misconfigured one. So you can actually have a look at the remediation documentation. It's just going to tell you to remove the rule. So, and that's all the runbook does. Or you can drill in to Security Hub, and that'll take you deep into the actual finding. So then you can have a look at the JSON there, whatever else. So I've got some remediation actions. I can remediate once, or I can request a custom remediation. Or if I wanted to, I could actually go up and check auto-remediate. But maybe I don't want to do that. I just want to remediate this once. Shouldn't be there, great. So, great, confirm. Now this is not waiting on a finding from Security Hub or config from a change. We've just simply triggered the runbook. We just said, run the runbook, great, off you run. So once that is happening, that runbook will take around about 30 seconds. If I had auto-remediation turned on, as I do for this open S3 bucket, which shouldn't be open. Did I open this one? Maybe I didn't open this one. I didn't open this one. Okay. I'm going to do that. Great. Testing McTest. We've just opened that bucket to the world. No, I haven't. I didn't put in confirm, which is. What's that?
You need to uncheck the checkbox again.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is this a support session for me? Oh, dear. I am highly content. I do know that this is case sensitive, which is funny. Okay, so block public access is off. Now, in this case, Security Hub and config will go and they'll detect, in 2 minutes they'll detect the change, and then they will create a finding, and then the finding will then trigger the actual runbook. But in this case, I've run this, and it has simply removed that security group. And you'll find now that it just removed the rule. Yeah, and it didn't blow the security group away. It has removed that pesky security group from your environment. See you later. All good. That's automation, eh? Okay, so this should still be in a failed state, even though I have remediated that, because the opposite process is happening to the one that we did with the S3 bucket, which is that Security Hub and config are actually now detecting that I have run the runbook, and they're detecting the change. And so it's going to take 2 minutes for this to actually fix. But in the meantime, we can go through here and we can go into S3.8, S3.8, and there it is, and it's passed. So that hasn't yet detected that change. That will be probably around about 30 seconds away. So we'll go off and do something else. We'll have a look at these stacks again. But bottom line is, you've got multiple S3 bucket or S3 controls, and they allow those controls. So there used to be 13, they've just expanded them. There are about 15 to 16 S3 controls now. You can use those to increase the granularity and increase the security of still having potentially public S3 buckets. You can say, okay, well, I just want read access, and that's, I think, S3.5, I think, if we go over here. S3 dot, you'll see all of these lovely controls. You've got S3.11, which is event notifications. Where's the one I'm looking for? Access logging. And you see S3.1. There you go. Block public access. I should school up on these. SDLC, you can see they're a swag load. But basically you can block public access, or you can simply make it more granular and you can have read-only access or write access. And that's just one of the many controls there. Now this should have remediated by now.
Is this across the whole VPC or the whole instance?
Say that again?
These controls, are they like the whole instance of AWS, or is it like the VPC?
It's per account, I believe. So AWS Security Hub will generate findings on a per account basis. So I will actually go, now this should have had plenty of time to do its little magic, and you can see that it has failed. So it failed, and we can now go in and we can check that it has actually remediated. It's run that runbook, it's had enough time. If I go back into permissions, unexpected error. Don't work with pets, children, or technology. There it is. Public access is on. Thank you. Get out of this demo. It's so good. Okay. Sweet. Yeah, let's go. Oh, nice, comforting presentation. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. We go back to this. Sweet. So, where are we? That's the live demo. Now, the contribution side of it, a remediation request, this is really where we want to be leveraging AI to then, after remediation request is received, it then goes into our NLP to automation engine. And this generates, so plain text in, and it will generate the core of the runbook. We then quality control that. We then curate it and see if other customers, it will be useful for other customers. And then we will actually add that, generate that new runbook, and then insert it back into the library. And all customers then benefit from that. And this is what it looks like. So basically we put in that, and that was actually a real request from a customer. And it then generates that, and then we go from there. Now we are looking, obviously, to automate that entire process, but it's a starting point. So what we have developed is the largest, safest security automation library in AWS. And we are looking also to work with customers to make that even larger and to increase those features that allow for this to have zero impact on availability. But we've got 600 customers or 600 enterprises across AWS that are using ASR in anger right now. But yeah, look, two things. If you want, yes, sign up. You can't actually deploy, you shouldn't deploy accounts using your phone. Don't do that, because it's ugly. But ultimately, also, we can actually, through our integration with the AWS well-architected tool, we can actually do an automated well-architected process, as in an automated well-architected framework review. So that we use to generate credits for you, and that can generate in under an hour about $2.5 grand worth of AWS credits. So if you want to, reach out. We'd love to have a chat with you about that. And that is that. So do we have any questions? I'd love some questions.
I got a loud
Who's got the mic?
Oh, that's fine. I got a loud enough
here.
voice. You said it was per account. So with Security Hub's organisation across account features, do you have like a organisational view for these security checks?
Yes, I think. Do you want to answer that?
I'm picturing a developer opening a button up and then it's locked and then they're opening a button.
But that's just sport. No, it's not. No, but that's where you don't want to be turning stuff on. But what you can do, if you've agreed as an organisation, are we all agreed? Because I mean, you don't have to do it at breakneck speed. Are we all agreed that we will not implement this poor practice? Yes, we are. What's the, opening port 22 to the world? What is the potential repercussion of that? Having a public lambda. So some of the CSPM, some of the really good ones now, not naming any names, but they'll actually do a really good job of providing context. And they'll show you an attack vector all the way through your environment. But what that attack vector is actually leveraging is misconfigurations in the vast majority of cases, at least partially. So it's like, I've seen a demo and it's like, well, you've got a public-facing lambda that has a vulnerability in it. There's a run book for public-facing lambdas and you shouldn't have them. So,
I guess at the end you get a Slack channel and say, we remediated this, so while that's happening,
Yep.
that bucket or remediate it,
Yep.
you just at the end ping the Slack channel and say, by the way, this happened.
Correct, that's part of the integration, like Slack or Teams, and it will send only the change in compliance, because it won't just go, I checked this, it's open, I checked this, it's open. Yeah, it will only send a change in compliance or an auto remediation. So it'll actually alert as to when that has happened. And look, if you start with the non-disruptive controls and the non-disruptive automation, and then you move on to, okay, what is potentially disruptive but is compliant, and we want for it to stay compliant, literally that's like 75% of the stuff. Then you start to remediate, and it's okay to remediate stuff manually. It's good, it's no problem. Just don't keep on doing it. Then you can start to remediate manually, and then if the entire organisation agrees, yes, we don't want to do this, we don't want to open RDP to the world, the ransomware delivery port, don't do that. And great, we want for that to always be shut. Well, auto-remediation will ensure that. And then the final step in that is actually having the matching controls all the way through from the pipeline, all the way through to prod. Final little question for you guys and gals is who drives all changes in your production environment through your pipeline? Oh, I got no hands. Or did I ask the wrong question?
Training.
As in, the only way to make a change in your environment is through your pipeline? No. Okay. So that's good. That's good. And look, that amount, that number is probably about right, which is it's sub 10%. Even the ones, now my next question for Shan is, you do that, great. Who has access to your environment and who could make changes? How many people?
Production.
Not a lot, we're getting something.
Not a lot. Exactly.
Actually locked down. Yeah.
But it isn't yet.
No, like, there's no one who has non-programmatic access.
Okay. That's a very good start, yeah.
If you want to get SOC 2,
Exception.
So you can look top two, no one can get to production.
well, you have to, whoever's in scope for prod, like I said, big reasons why they're use. They can be like short-lived, like you can have like a token banning issues.
It's the same with most of the other standards as well, like PCI and all the rest of it.
Yep. But I mean, even if you are best practice, a belt and braces or belts and braces approach to security would be, I'm not pushing stuff into misconfigurations essentially and other bad stuff into my environment. And then also, well, great, in which case then, are the good or bad actors compromised or not compromised? It will either be auto-remediated and or alerted if there are unauthorized changes in the environment. And that is possible. if all of the keys are being chucked away or being given away. Did you have a question, Doug? No. No.
I know how it works. I'm good.
Yeah, good.
Anyone else?
One more question.
Already my 10K is done.
Who likes their leather coasters?
My
Make me feel
question-
happy. Come on, hands up. Yeah, good. Okay, put them on your desk.
How intelligent is this, and how many levels would you go to check whether it is actually open to the world or not? Because you could, in theory, we have the same problem where traffic is logged from security groups, and it's actually in real life not open to the world. But the rule is there.
Yep.
Which tools can.
So if it's not open to the world, if it's literally not open to 0.0.0.0, you won't fail that control. But if what it sounds like you're talking about is if you've got a large complex environment and you actually, this is where the context, and we don't do a great job of context, our focus is elsewhere, but this is where some of those tools that are emerging now that actually offer you context, and they'll offer, let's say, architectural context and the flow, an attack vector flow through your environment. They're really good. But you want to be fixing stuff. Like, you know, and if the opportunity is there for you to fix misconfigurations anywhere in your environment, it will only make you more secure. Go for your life.
Think about the environment where the VPC is internal, you know. Think about the environment, right? And there's no internet gateway attached, there's no transit gateway or something like that. It's not there at all, you know. And you have a security group and which is open to the 0.0.0, right? And you open the port 22. What it's going to do in that scenario? Is it going to check only 22 0.0, or is it going to go deep and check, saying, okay, there's no internet gateway attached, there's no transit gateway attached, means I treat it like this because this is private, and I treat it like this, I'll bypass this.
You can still have multiple security groups, and you can basically have some that are open, and in that situation I wouldn't auto-remediate because it is going to break stuff. It's like no, but that would be one of the final ones, the controls that you're actually working through, and that's that subset. That's and if you keep on working on these, then what happens is you will either resolve them, you'll remediate them manually, and then you'll backfill with auto-remediation, or you'll accept it. And that's absolutely fine. It's like you've got a compensating control. Great, it is open, it is technically misconfigured, but I'm accepting this. No problem.
Thank you.
Yep. Correct. And look, even better than that, you have the opportunity using automation to ratchet, and you just get more and more and more closer. You get closer and closer to best practice. Yep.
Is there a way you can mark a finding not to be remediated? For example, in our company, we have an S3 bucket where we store public documents like brochures, product documentations.
Very common.
Where it's open to the public, but read only. So how can you tell the tool do not fix this?
Look, all of it is deployed. So the availability safeguards, as I like to call them, the first one is it's deployed to alert only. So it's not going to, you haven't configured any automation, it's not going to change anything at all. The second one is you can remediate once, and you can also configure it on a control by control basis. So you could simply leave that, great, I'm not going to auto-remediate S3 buckets, absolutely fine. But if you have a change in compliance on that S3 bucket, you don't want all the alert noise coming through going, guess what, your S3 bucket's open, I'll see you tomorrow, guess what, your S3 bucket's open. You'll only see the change in compliance, and that's the stuff that you want to see. So it would be configured absolutely not to auto-remediate. If you want, you can even turn that control off. If you just say, look, this control is not of value to me, you can turn the controls off on a control by control basis as well. So, and it's very common, like logos, customer logos, something like that. If you like.
Just have a quick question. You mentioned AI is your secret sauce, so I'd like to understand a bit more, like in what way you are using AI
Sure.
in this area.
Sure. It's essentially to allow customers to request, and or even us, we're the first ones, I'm the first user of it, which is to request either different remediation runbooks or new remediation runbooks. So if I want, hey, I've got like, I think it's SNS.2, and it's a really simple one. It's one of those controls where you just turn it on, and it's non-intrusive. Wonderful. Currently, it doesn't exist. I can request that using natural language. As soon as I hit submit, it will go in. And look, I'm happy to be open about it. Right now, it's integrated with GPT 3.5 via API, and it will generate the core of the runbook. We then need to build out the rest of the runbook so that it will actually function in the automation framework. And then we quality control it, we test it, we curate it to see if it's going to be of use to other customers. So if there's no automation already, we're going to add it into the library. And then we'll release it, and we'll release it to everybody else. So this is one of the reasons why, we've written all of the controls, all of the automation for the controls for S3. We've got them all, and all of the EC2 controls. We've also got them ready to roll in the next few weeks.
All right. I think, if you've got any questions, please feel free to approach them and ask them. I would encourage you guys now to go have some delicious pizzas. And just a reminder, we've got the draw is still open. So it's open for another 10 minutes, and then I'll be announcing the winner. So you guys can, I'll put it up in the screen. It'll be outside as well, so you just need to scan it and go. And last but not least, thank you both, Lorenzo and Shan, for your awesome presentations. I hope you guys found it informational, because I think it's a pretty fascinating thing there. So we've got this opportunity to ask two legends essentially whatever questions you want to. Pick their brains. I think, this is probably, in my experience, probably one of the best turnouts that we've had. So thank you all for coming, and quick shout out to all those newbies. I believe there are a couple of newbies. So thank you for coming in, and I guess we'll be seeing you next month. So cheers.
Just with the pizza, if everyone initially can just do 2 slices to make sure everyone gets, and then go back for more, that'd be great.
Too many people. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
That's me.
That's right. Yeah, that's okay. So,
IAG, really close.
okay. Oh, great.
What we are doing, because I'm in the SRE team.
Right, so reliably.